Hi, welcome. My name is Maryam Ekhtiar. I'm Senior Research Associate in the Department of Islamic Art, and I've worked on this project for all the time I've been at the Met, which is 8 years, and the project's been on for about 8.5 years. So I've seen a lot and seen this project through to some extent and worked on different aspects of it. So tonight, I'd like to take you through a journey through the galleries of the arts of the Arab lands, Iran, Central Asia, and later South Asia, with the hope of introducing you to the galleries and their interpretive messages through exploring the thematic and contextual displays, as well as displays that illustrate important interconnections both within these regions and cultures and outside their fold, such as with China and with Europe. Before I start, I'd like to outline the vision of the new galleries, which is different than the old one, quite different. The galleries are organized into regional blocks that this time around celebrate the diversity and texture of this part of the world, this vast region over about 1,300 years. And Islam is a thread that binds it together, but is not the dominating force like it was before. So that we're looking at this vast region historically as one that was interconnected and that it was global as it is today. And it's part of our shared heritage. It's not their heritage or another heritage, but it's really, we're all part of the same world, and we were back centuries ago. And this is sort of the premise of this talk, to talk about how we did this in the galleries, through thematic displays, through contextualizing, and through showing interconnections through juxtaposition of objects, etc. So So it's sort of a two-pronged approach. It's regional, and we decided that the Arab lands, Turkey, Iran, Central Asia, and later South Asia were the parameters of our collection. And that, yes, there is Islamic art in Southeast Asia or in Sub-Saharan Africa, but we don't have that in our collection, or very much of it. So these are the parameters, and the thread of the religion that binds all of these together. And one visually sees that with calligraphy and the presence of fine calligraphy all the way through, and in some cases, the art of calligraphy. So just to give you an idea of the art of these regions, some of the objects in these regional blocks. And, okay, yeah, sure. I can go back and you can take another look. I'm sorry. So the floor plan is interesting in that it is above the Roman court. It consists of 15 galleries that are around the Roman court, which is below, And there is an inner ring and an outer ring, and the inner ring is punctured by these windows that have grills on them, wooden grills on them. And it's also interesting that when you look from those windows down to the Roman court, there is this sense of interconnection with the classical world, which is particularly interesting and particularly relevant in the early periods. Now, the arrows you see show the different entrances and options you have. Our idea is that we want the visitor to have different options, different experiences in going through the galleries. You could enter through the introductory gallery and go right and go around and go chronologically. You could enter from the introductory gallery and go straight into Western Islam and then the Moroccan court and then to Iran. You can go just to the later South Asian gallery and go through to the art of South Asia under the Mughals and the Deccan and other dynasties. Or you can enter from the European painting, in 19th century European paintings gallery, and where there are Orientalist paintings exhibited, which is also very interesting. So there are various options, and one could take with it. Now, another interconnection is that our galleries, the entrance faces the entrance to the galleries of the ancient Near East, art of the ancient Near East, which sort of shows a break with the sort of the end of a era and the beginning of a new one, but it also shows continuity between the two, and that's actually more important. And so from there you walk into our galleries, and you have the map on one side, and the entrance takes you into the introductory gallery. So here we're in the introductory gallery, and the introductory gallery is not really thematically grouped. It's highlights from the collection. Some of the greatest works in our collection are exhibited in this gallery, and perhaps the theme that comes out the most is the unifying presence of calligraphy and the art of writing. And every region is represented in this gallery, and it's basically to woo us in to see more, and with some of the greatest objects of our collection. So you're standing here and you want to take the chronological path, and I think that's for me the most logical tonight, to do it this way. And you see this three-part arch, which resembles the archway, one of the archways in the Great Mosque of Damascus in Syria. And it's very Byzantine and classical in flavor, with the Corinthian capitals and the type of arch that it is. So sort of evoking this entrance into the earliest period of Islamic art, or earliest period of art during this of this region. Now, when you go in, this gallery is the art at the dawn of the Islamic era, showing continuity with pre-Islamic traditions rather than break a big, it's not, the Islam didn't just come and, there wasn't a break right after the arrival of Islam visually. This happened, this took a long time to evolve, and probably you can't begin to see something more distinctly Islamic until about the 9th century. So this early period, sometimes it's the differences are subtle, and you begin to see something, but it's really about continuity with the pre-Islamic traditions. And what are they? They're the pre-Islamic Persian traditions, the Byzantine tradition, and the Coptic tradition of especially textile production in Egypt. And one example, just to talk about one example, is this fabulous throne leg that is in the form of, it's one leg of, we think of what would have been a throne, with the head of an eagle and the paw of a lion, which is a griffin. This has been studied extensively, and it could fit in the pre-Islamic Iran as much as it fits in the Islamic Iran during this transitional period. However, the foliation on the sort of neck and chest of the animal suggests that it is actually of the probably around the 8th century, and this was determined by comparison with wall paintings and comparative material like wall paintings particularly. And it's from the eastern most regions of Iran after the conquests. And of course, up front, we have a case dedicated to Islam's holy book. And as you know, that it has an exalted position in Islamic culture due to the fact that the revelations were conveyed to Muhammad in Arabic, and the Qur'an is the sum of, or the revelations in visual form and written form. And Qur'an started being produced quite early, and the earliest ones were produced on parchment. Here you have a bifolio from a early Qur'an, and you see the Kufic script, which is this angular, very horizontally oriented script, and you don't see any vowel marks. It's very stark, but there is a real beauty to these early scripts, and the fact that somehow, because of the format of the paper or other reasons, the horizontality was prized rather than verticality. So the letters are stretched and across the page, and there are usually few lines on a page. And then there is another example of a later Quran folio that is probably from the 12th century, and that one is on paper, and that's when paper, at least in the Eastern Islamic world, is used more frequently and takes over, sort of, and the format is vertical, and so you see all these very elongated shafts. You see, and also very ornamental kind of script. And it's interesting that when you study the buildings and the architecture and the decorative art, you see these very ornamental scripts of the same sort on buildings of the same period, which helps date things if you don't have dates. That's how we do a lot of comparative research to get to arrive at a date sometimes, or approximate date. So this second half of this gallery focuses on the art of the second Islamic dynasty, the Abbasid dynasty, that was in power from 750 to 1258. However, this part of the gallery is probably just 8th through 10th century, or 8th and 9th, 10th century. And in the Abbasid period, you begin to see the emergence gradually of a more distinct kind of sensibility that is different than what was before. And one example is the surface ornamentation, of which there were several kinds, but one kind was what we call the beveled style, which is an abstract vegetal leaf type motif that you see across media here. You see it on plaster, you see it on wood doors, you see it on stone capitals, and you see it on ceramics and glass as well. So it starts, there starts being a unified sort of visual vocabulary that's developing in this region. And here you have it on ceramic, the same very abstract vegetal motif. Now, just to say that throughout the galleries we have numerous thematic cases, and that's the focus of my talk today. We start here also with one case that has examples of painted luster from all different parts of the region. And the reason why it's in this gallery is that luster painted pottery was an Iraqi innovation, and it was a very important innovation. It was a technique where metal oxides were used metal oxide glazes were used to decorate ceramics, and so that they would have a certain shine. So you would have different tones of metal oxide. Different metal oxides would produce different tones and different colors of metallic colors. And this started in Iraq, this technique, and it traveled all over, and so its impact was global. It started in Iraq, it moved to Iran, it moved to Egypt and Syria, then it moved to Spain, and eventually to Italy and Europe and the Americas. So it's really, this is one technique that had a global impact and is extremely important. Then we move into the gallery, the next gallery, which deals with the art of the princely states that emerged after the Abbasid Caliphate started sort of becoming weaker and decentralizing. Originally it was in Baghdad was the capital, and then Samarra, and that's when it was sort of the golden age. And after a while, these princely states started coming up, and especially in the eastern reaches. And this particular section of this gallery is devoted to the Met excavations in the city of Nishapur, which is in northeastern Iran, in the 1930s and 40s. And it's this excavation was undertaken with the National Museum in Iran, and then the finds were split. And so the Met has a huge collection of this material, which includes ceramics and shards, glass, metalwork, everyday objects like combs, beads, cosmetic containers, and other small objects. And so the display is kind of looks archaeological, and one of the great finds was were these panels from a site in Nishapur called the Sabz Pushan site, and the configuration and the way that they are displayed evokes a room in a wealthy person, probably a wealthy person's residence, and in fact is heavily influenced by Abbasid, Baghdad and Samarra surface decoration. I mean, everything is adapted, but it is a continuation of that. And just to say that this was a very important city on the Silk Road. It was a trading city. And so, you know, these objects are not royal objects. They're objects that belong to regular people. And but they're very fine and aesthetically quite beautiful. Here are some of the beads and containers. And then you're greeted into the next part of this gallery, which are more of these princely states, and especially two of the dynasties, especially one which the Seljuks are of Turkic origin. There's Turks from the steppes of Central Asia conquer and embrace Islam and rule Iran and that whole area, Central Asia, for until about the end of the 12th century. And this feline incense burner is one of the favorites we have at the Met. The children love it. Everybody takes to this. But it's an extremely important piece. And because of its size and because of the quality of work that's on it and the inscriptions that it contains, we know a lot about it. We know for whom it was made and by whom it was made. And so it's a two-part object. The head comes off and you can put the incense inside, and then that's how then it starts emerging from these pierced holes on the body. One thing that strikes you when you're walking in is that Islamic art, or what we know, is not supposed to have animals and people and statues, and here we are, you know, there's so many, and this gallery is actually full of them. And so we just have to remember that there is a clear division between the religious and the secular, and these kind of objects would have been used in a secular context but not in a religious context. They wouldn't appear in a mosque or in a religious school or in a tomb, but in a palace or for private use. Even if it's on the royal level, it's private use. So there are a huge amount of objects with figural decoration as well as statues produced in this period. One case that emphasizes this, that contains two heads of princes, Seljuk princes, shows all kinds of the variety of the subjects on these ceramics, which include princely couples, princes on horseback, or stories from the Shahnamo. And the Shahnamo is extremely important in this context, as well as all the way through in Iranian history and Islamic history itself, because it is the Persian national epic, and it is the most widely illustrated text in the Islamic world, And the Iranians are particularly, proud of it and celebrate the stories, know the stories. And one of the stories that's depicted on one of these vessels is the story of Bahram and Azade from the Shahnamo. This is a story of the King Bahram who goes on the hunt with his lover, and they're hunting, and she challenges him to hunt a gazelle in a certain way, and he ends up pinning the ear to the tail, and she finds that cold and cold-hearted and mean, and reprimands him, and then he gets very upset and throws her from the camel. So in both of these ceramics, you see her on the horse, on the camel, playing a lute, and on the ground being trampled by the camel. And so the two moments are conflated into one. And this, is only one of the many stories. I mean, there are stories of battles, and the Shahnamo was versified by Ferdowsi, the poet Ferdowsi, the Iranian poet, in around the year 1010, and it contained about over 50,000 rhyming couplets of poetry. And the subject matter is the legendary history of Iran, coupled with the real history of Iran up to the Arab conquest. So it's a mixture of fact and fiction, and it has underlying Zoroastrian themes of polarities between light and dark, and good and evil, and it was originally part of an oral tradition that eventually got recorded, then put to poetry, and then it's been with us since. So it's an extremely important book. Now, one of the points I wanted to stress about Seljuk ceramics is the variety and ingenuity of the techniques. This technique is a technique called mina'i, that the result of which is a miniature painting-like image with all the complexity and color on a ceramic. And unfortunately, we don't have too many surviving, we don't have hardly any surviving manuscripts to know what Seljuk manuscript illustration was, Iranian Seljuk manuscript illustration was like. So we rely on these ceramics for this. They are what survives and what we know. And this was very complex technique of using a variety of colors, and it was a multi-step technique. The pot would be put in the kiln several times at various temperatures to produce this complex, intricate kind of effect. You have more here. Another case that is very interesting in this gallery, and it goes across cultures and across time, is a case dedicated to astronomy and astrology in the Islamic world, or in this vast region. And there are manuscripts that focus on the constellations. The one in the middle is a page from one of those manuscripts, and usually the constellations are shown shown twice next to each other. One is the image from when you look at it on the instrument, and on the scientific instrument, and the other one is the image from the skies. So every one of these constellations has two images that are side by side. Next to it, you have an astrolabe from the 17th century Iran, and these astrolabes helped calculate the direction of Mecca. They were used to calculate all kinds of scientific questions or calculations. It also, they were admired in Europe, and we know that there were certain Flemish and Italian families that tried to copy these. And there are drawings that survive that are proof of that. Let me go back. There are also coins with zodiac signs as we know them. The zodiac signs are the same. Gold coins from Mughal India, as well as a number of other objects in this case. And then you move into a whole different world, and that is the world of medieval Egypt and Syria from the 10th through the 16th century, and takes you to the west, and what's interesting, as I mentioned before, is that there is an entrance from the 19th century European Orientalist painting gallery into the galleries, into this particular gallery. So it's an interesting and thought-provoking juxtaposition to have the European viewpoint of this world juxtaposed with the material culture of the world itself. And this can be problematic, but it's also, it could be it's an interesting juxtaposition, thought-provoking. Now, one of the ways that we evoked context here is this installation of mosque lamps that are hung by chains or suspended with chains from the ceiling, and just as they would be in a mosque or a theological school or a tomb. And these mosque lamps were modeled on one of our own mosque lamps, the difference being that these are not enamel painted and ours are enamel painted. And one of them served as the model, and they were blown in Brooklyn, New York, and give a real sense of the period and the place in this context. And one particular example of I'm showing you here is a lamp that was commissioned by the Sultan for one of his officers, the bowman of the Mamluk court in Egypt and Syria, the court of the Mamluks. And his emblem or blazon is painted 9 times onto this lamp. And so we know for whom it was made, we know his name, and many of these lamps also had Quranic verses, usually the verse of light on them. And however, this is not the one that inspired those lamps. This is another, just as a very important piece. And these lamps, these enamel painted lamps, became very popular in Europe, in Venice, and they tried to, the Venetians tried to copy them and produce ones like them. So they were exported as well. And here is a grouping of these lamps showing, different ones with different emblems, they're dedicated to different officers or different people in the Mamluk court. And here are glass blowers, and those are the lamps. These lamps would have been, they're oil lamps. And that's how they would light up the mosque. In those days, there was no electricity. So from that gallery, you walk into a gallery that is contains the art of the 14th and 15th century Iran and Central Asia. And it's a very large gallery, and there are a lot of seated areas in it because we tried very hard to create the conditions for people to sit and enjoy the manuscripts and look at them up close, enjoy the details with the best lighting, the least amount of glare, and when you enter this gallery, you have a section on the art of the Ilkhanid dynasty, which were a dynasty. The Ilkhan means subordinate to the Khan, and the Khan headquarters were in China. So it was a sort of a branch of that dynasty that was ruling Iran during this period. And you have the profusion of Chinese imagery, and you begin to see all kinds of Chinese animals, and both kind of like dragons, phoenixes, also the fish at the bottom of the bowl, and lotuses, plants, Chinese plants and motifs coming into Persian art. And there is a different sensibility. It's more linear, and in any case, what happens is it starts getting adapted, and in Iran, it's never going to be the same. It's going to be adapted to a different taste, a new people, different use, and as you walk, you see this niche, and this is one of the great pieces in our collection, and also one of the largest pieces, and it is a wonderful mihrab. A mihrab is an elaborate niche that indicates the direction of Mecca, which is the direction of prayer, and that's where people would face to pray. And this particular one is from the Ilkhanid period, and it's dated, and it is made of cut glazed tiles that are fitted together like a jigsaw puzzle, and it contains all different kinds of ornament that we associate with when we see what we know about this art: vegetal, geometric, calligraphic ornament. All of them are there on this mihrab, and it has 3 important inscriptions on it, and one of the sort of tasks we have is to read or make sure that these inscriptions are read, because they tell us a lot about the objects and their contexts. And this one, the outer border, is a Quranic verse, and then the inscription around the around the arch, the OG arch, talks about the pillars of Islam, and then in the middle there is an inscription here that says that, I think it's a saying of the Prophet that says that the mosque is the abode of every believer. So it's very appropriate. And this wasn't a niche in a mosque. So you know that the mihrabs were not only in mosques, but often in mosques. And as you come into the 15th century and end of 14th, beginning of 15th century, we have borrowed a number of objects from the Arms and Armor Department. In fact, they have collaborated and lent us a significant number of objects. And this is a case dedicated to Turkmen armor, all from the Arms and Armor department. And we have borrowed in for other areas in the installation as well from them. This is a case that is wonderful. I mean, this is a period in the 15th century in Iran and Central Asia where you get a real flowering of the arts of the book and the emergence of what we call the classical style of Persian painting. And this installation celebrates the book as a luxury object, not just something to be read, but to be enjoyed, to be sort of all the aspects of it are focused on by the artist. For example, you have books that have fabulous calligraphy, marbleized borders, great illumination, stenciled illumination. You have all kinds of different kinds of what we call border illumination. You have bindings that are leather and gilded and sometimes studded with precious stones. Every part of it is, is a work of art, and this is the dream of any patron would be to have something like this in their collection, in their library. It was a matter of prestige and power to own books of this sort, not books as or to present them as gifts. Often they were presented as gifts. Then I'm going to take you into the galleries for the Ottoman art. There are 3 galleries, each representing a certain aspect of Ottoman art. The central one is one that focuses on the imperial production under the Ottoman rulers of Turkey, and on the right you have a carpet room with Ottoman carpets of all different kinds, showing the rich variety of production under the Ottomans, and some also non-royal kind of carpets. And what's interesting is a lot of these carpets are recognizable to us because they appear in European paintings, and they're named after the painters, the European painters, who include them in their paintings, like Holbein and Lotto and Ghirlandaio, and so this particular middle gallery is more of the royal production and court and elite. Some of the finest objects, Ottoman objects in our collection. The middle case is an installation of Iznik pottery, and it shows the range of Iznik pottery and the history of Iznik pottery. Iznik was a city outside of Istanbul. It was a center for the manufacture of a wide variety of ceramics, and had a long history of production, starting with certain types and ending with certain types. I'm not going to go into that too much, just for you to see the range of types that were produced there. And a lot of these were produced, they weren't produced as much for the court as they were produced for probably wealthy people, and export, because in the paintings you see the court using Chinese porcelain, or that's what you see, and this is also true in Iran. However, a type that is very important is what we call the Rhodian type, with the various colors, including this very rich tomatoey red looks like sealing wax, and it stands in relief. And there's just really very, rich glazes. And what I know is that there have been attempts to emulate this or reproduce these techniques, and people have not been able to find the recipe or the right way of making them, recreating them. It's really amazing. There is a case dedicated to the time of Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent, and in that case there is a tughra, which is the hand sign of the Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent, and it is not only a wonderful work of calligraphy, but a great work of illumination. There are spiraling gold and lapis scrolls filling the inside. And just to say what these were hand signs of the Sultan, and each Ottoman Sultan had his own. So, and they all pretty much look similar. They followed a formula, and this one was crowning an edict, or what we call a ferman, an edict that would have been long. So this is just the top, and but it conveys the luxury and the refinement of the art that was produced for the court. And down there you will see a saber that's covered in Quranic verses, and is said to have belonged to Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent himself. And you have also ceramics that may have been used at the court or were popular at that time. Another thematic grouping is this grouping showing how designs that were generated from a centralized workshop, and that there were certain designs that defined the dynasty or defined the rule of these dynasties, of this dynasty, I'm sorry. And here you have, for example, this drawing, which is in this Chinese style with the serrated leaves, and it's a drawing of a dragon. And if you look closely at the drawing, you see these serrated leaves and sort of very linear quality to it. And you begin to see that also in the tiles and the rendition of the leaves in the tiles, as well as in, for example, the back of a mirror. And if you go to your right, you arrive at a carpet gallery that I just talked about, that has the variety of Ottoman carpets. And the stone, this kind of burgundy colored stone, shows one effort to try to recreate a context and recreate a feeling of being in the place. And the stones of many of these galleries were quarried in the various regions that are represented. On the left, so you have three galleries. The middle one was the Imperial, then you have the carpet room, and then this is a period room, one of the favorite objects, if you want to call it an object, favorite ones in the collection. It's used to be in the introductory gallery in the old galleries, and now it's been moved to its correct geographic historic context. And it's an 18th century room from one of the provinces of the Ottoman Empire. It's a room from Damascus, Syria, and it's dated 1707. And it's one of the earliest dated rooms of its kind, or perhaps the earliest dated room of its kind. And this was a big conservation effort. The room was dismantled and was restored, and then moved and then put back together. And in the process, we found that the orientation wasn't correct, and so it was reconfigured. And so that the entrance would be from the courtyard rather than from the front, what it used to be in the old galleries. So you would enter from the courtyard into one of those window-like, there was a small door, and this was in order to be more private and not have as much noise and from the street. So it was sort of one of the purposes. This is a reception room, some of an affluent person, of somebody and who was maybe a learned person, definitely affluent person, maybe a merchant. And you can imagine entertaining in this space, smoking a water pipe, drinking tea, and you have all the possessions. He has all his possessions there, the kind of things he might have used. And then there's a fountain which has the trickling water, which also adds to the ambiance. And we know that the fountain is the earliest part of the room, and it might date to about a century earlier than the rest of the room, or maybe a little less, but quite a bit earlier. And this shows that these elements were reused. And we're moving into later Persian galleries, and you see a lot of carpets on the wall. The carpets show the range of carpet production and types of carpets that were produced in Iran between the 16th and the 19th century. And you have an unusual array of types. You have garden carpets, and you have hunting or animal, what we call animal carpets. You have medallion carpets. You have compartment carpets and Portuguese carpets. So you have a great range. Of course, they're not all from the same time, but you know, this region has always been known for its carpets. But these are huge and often imperial carpets. The one at the center is particularly important. It's called the Emperor's Carpet. And the reason it's called the Emperor's Carpet is because it's said to have belonged to emperors. Not to say that it was actually commissioned for an emperor. One of the Safavid kings, or probably early or mid 16th century Safavid king, I think Shahnamo-Bahram maybe, and it shows animals in combat in the middle, and which is was a royal symbol that goes back to pre-Islamic period in Iran. And it has a poem by a medieval poet by the name of Faryabi, and the poem is about the coming of spring. And often these carpets were woven in pairs. And the pair to this one, the mate to this one, is in Vienna, and in the Mack Museum in Vienna. And between the two of them, we were able to decipher the inscription, the poetry. And we know if it's about the coming of spring, it's possible it was intended as a New Year's gift. But it does, the poetry ends with a reference to the king. So I would say this is probably a royal commission for the king or by the king. It's kind of like long live the king, may the king. So one of the very important thematic installations in this gallery is 12 illustrated folios of our treasure the Shah Tahmasp Shahnamo, which was an early 16th century manuscript, royal manuscript, one of the finest ever produced. And we have 78 illustrated folios, of which at any time there will be 12 on view. So we rotate them every 3 months due to their sensitivity to light. And this is one of the great treasures of our collection. As I talked about the Shahnamo already, but this is a royal commission, and many artists worked on it. There was a division of labor. It was made in a royal workshop, so that we know some of the names of the artists, and others we know by comparing style and through stylistic comparison. And so here we have just about the best kind of conditions to view these manuscripts, the details. It's all about detail and patterning and textile patterning and architectural surfaces. But there is a fantastical sort of quality to them. You have, purple rocks and all kinds of liberties have been taken in terms of color, the vibrancy of the color. And we know that natural pigments were used, including saffron, malachite, lapis. Of course, gold leaf was extensively used, and various other pigments. And that's one of the reasons they've been so well preserved. We have a whole case for the first time dedicated to Persian drawings of the 16th and 17th century, and we have a really great collection. And in the past, it was just mixed in with the paintings. Now we're giving it its own place, and our head of department is an expert in this area, so we have enough to rotate several times and show you the best of what we have. Now, this is a case about interconnections, and I was talking about interconnections with the outside world. This is a case dedicated to interconnections of Iran and China in the 17th century. And here you see different ceramics and different types of ceramics that imitate Ming Dynasty blue and white Chinese ceramics. And the reason being that in that period, Chinese ceramics came into the court. Large amounts of very fine Chinese ceramics came into the court, and sometimes were gifted to shrines as endowments. And these were very much prized, and the Iranian potters wanted to copy these. But the problem was that they couldn't make porcelain, and from the earlier period on, they tried to find ways of making something that was like porcelain, a material that was like porcelain. And so these are stone paste, which is a mixture of clay and glassy material, quartz and other materials, that is stronger and more sort of malleable than just clay, earthenware. And here you have two drinking vessels in the shape of an elephant called kendis. One is made of porcelain and is Chinese, and the other one is made of stone paste and is Persian. And clearly you can see the importance they gave to copying these, and sometimes the copies were so good they were sold and exported and sought after as well. But the problem with the porcelain was that they didn't have the materials. They didn't have kaolin. The Chinese had this material that you could make porcelain with, but they didn't. And so porcelain doesn't come into this region until very late, maybe 18th, 19th century. You have another thematic case here, which is dedicated to 19th century Iranian glass. And you have all these interesting shapes and zoomorphic forms. We know that there was Venetian glass was imported into Iran in the 17th century, 18th century, and they're featured in paintings. But in those paintings, we're not sure if they're actually Venetian or Persian or but what we know is from the historical sources that there were centers producing these glass objects in Iran in the 19th century. And we think that these are from that period. And they're quite fine. And you have these swan neck bottles with an eye cup that have stories about them that women who were separated from their husbands and missed their husbands would cry in them and save the tears and prove how much they missed their husband by the amount that was accumulated in these bottles, because it looks like an eye cup. But in any case, they call them swan neck bottles. Yeah. And then you move into the galleries of later South Asia, from the 15th century through the 18th century. And you really get a great feeling in this gallery of a sense of place. You have the sandstone floors, the rose-colored walls, all these wonderful carpets and marble and sandstone pierced screens, which you'll see in a minute, I believe. And those archways are Mughal, from some Mughal building, with the flowers, carved flowers on them. And this case is devoted to precious objects, such as objects made of precious stones, semi-precious stones like nephrite and jade, and also inlaid objects, jewel inlaid objects, which was one of the fortes of the Mughals of India. And one particular object that is fascinating is this chrysanthemum bowl, which is nephrite, and it's beautifully carved, and it's carved in India. Of course, we know jade came from Central Asia, it was imported into India, and these were very finely carved. They had very thin bodies, and what's interesting is that it has a Chinese inscription on it. And the Chinese inscription has been read. And what it says is that the Chinese who would be importing these, and they really prized them and appreciated them, somebody wrote on it that no one can carve jade, or no jade carver is better or more skilled than the carvers of Hindustan, which means that even the Chinese look to the Indians in this form of craft, and it's an amazing inscription. And the object next to it is a mango flask, which is rock crystal. It's made of two pieces, and it's fit together and with a web of gold wire and different gems, rubies and emeralds. And it would have been used for perfume or this sort of mild narcotic called pan. That's what. And just talking about the amazing skills of the jade carvers, Mughal jade carvers, they were capable of carving animals, you know, for example, very realistic um, images of animals down to the ear and the eyes, and it's extremely finely carved, and it was very difficult to carve jade. And this one is particularly important because it represents a nilgai, which is a blue bull, which is an animal that was native to India. And in fact, across the gallery, you have an image from the Shah Jahan album of a blue bull by one of the court artists, Mansour, who also painted animals and flowers. And it's like, yes, it's similar to that. And this also shows a keen interest in observation of nature, and especially on the part of a particular ruler, although there was this appreciation more widespread, but Jahangir was particularly interested in animals and nature and natural science. And here is the case dedicated to the Shah Jahan album, which is, I don't know if everybody knows what an album is. A royal album like this is like a fancy scrapbook of a patron's favorite paintings, portraits, animal studies, calligraphies, beautifully illuminated calligraphies with fabulous borders, all brought together and actually kind of given a cohesive look by a lot of the borders are similar, so that, or they kind of belong together. And so that's what this was. And this particular one was started by Jahangir and continued by his son, Shah Jahan. And here are some examples of the lavish pages. So these are not manuscript illustration. They don't illustrate a story. There is no narrative. It's very random, but it shows the taste and refinement of a patron, a royal patron. And some of the greatest works are preserved in these, in fact. And the adjoining gallery is kind of an interesting new addition to our galleries. It's a gallery of non-Muslim, later Indian art, along with some Mughal or Deccan art as well, but mostly Hindu courts of Rajput Hills and Pahari painting. And this particular room shows the interconnection between the Muslim courts and the non-Muslim courts and the artistic exchanges that took place between them. And one section is devoted to company school painting, and this bat and a few others are great examples of company school paintings, and a very popular painting. This bat is a recent acquisition, and it's featured almost everywhere. You probably know him yourself. Now, what are company school paintings? Company school paintings are paintings that were commissioned by English patrons, that they would commission Hindu artists to paint for them and paint the flora and fauna of the land. And at that time, that was colonial period, so they would document the flora and fauna of the land the animals, the plants, the flowers, etc. And usually these paintings are very realistic, but they're big. And the landscapes are small, but the animals are very largely depicted in front of these long, small landscapes. And this is the a fruit bat. There he is. So coming to a whole different section, we're returning back to the Western Islamic world. And if you went from the introductory gallery straight in, as I pointed out in the very beginning on the floorplan, you will end up here. And that's another experience you could have. And this celebrates 8 centuries of Islamic art in Europe, include Europe and North Africa, sort of. It's Spain, North Africa, southern Italy, and Sicily. And for this gallery, we collaborated with the Hispanic Society, and they have a really great collection of Islamic art from Islamic Spain. So they have lent us over 25 objects that are on display here, along with our objects. And here are some of the objects they've lent us. The pyxis, the container, the ivory carved container is possibly one of the finest of its kind. And we know that these containers were made for the women of the court. And we know that through the inscriptions on them for princesses or the women of the court. And many were used to hold cosmetics and precious gifts. But the carving is absolutely magnificent on these. Here you have a case that focuses on the carved ivories from Islamic Spain from the 10th century under the Spanish Umayyads. And you have a very interesting mixture of influences from Syria and Spain, and it's all come together because the origins of the Spanish Umayyads were they're Syrian. So there was like a Byzantine link in that way, and then their own local vocabulary all brought together. And the plaque is probably from the side of a box, and you see the symmetry, and you see the very sort of repeat along a symmetrical axis, and a kind of textile feel to it. And the eyes would have, we know that the eyes, I think, would have been red stones inlaid into the eyes of the animals and the people and the birds on this. And there is a case of Qur'ans and holy books of Spain from the 13th to the 18th century, showing book illumination from Islamic Spain, including a fabulous Qur'an page, large Qur'an page in Maghribi script, which is this script that is commonly used in Spain and North Africa. And this is a very fine piece with great illumination. The medallion on the side is a work of art in itself. If you look at it carefully, the scrolls, the vegetal scrolls, and with the gold leaf, and it's on parchment, which we talked about earlier. Somehow in Spain, parchment continued to be produced until about the 13th century. Parchment was continued to be used for books and Qur'ans until the 13th century, whereas it went out of use in other regions. And there are other books in this case that show the artistic exchanges between the Islamic communities and the Jewish communities, and how the visual vocabulary is reflected in the decorations of, let's say, a Hebrew Bible, or we were able to show that as well. And going back to luster, where I started, luster came to Spain probably through Egypt. However, in Spain, the body was not the same. It was not stone paste. I think it was some sort of clay. They continued using earthenware, sort of red clay. And here are luster examples of luster painted tiles and bowls from late 15th century onward, because this tradition continued after the fall of Islam in Spain in the late 15th century. So you have there's a longevity to these motifs, to these techniques afterwards. So a lot of these were produced, let's say, in the 16th century as well. And here you have, and that the one on the left is contains a pseudo inscription. It kind of alludes to an Arabic inscription, but it's not. It's it's decorative, and it's a combination of luster and this kind of underglaze technique, which was very common in these. And to end, I'm going to take you to the famous Moroccan court, which is an idea that we came up with to have a space that's Islamic, that when you stand in it, you feel you're in a place, in an interior that it's sort of, and it's a resting place, a place of contemplation. And we also thought it would be really great to celebrate the living traditions of craftsmanship, and trying to figure out which traditions have held up, or who's maintained the highest standards. And we decided to go to Morocco. And Morocco is one place that these traditions have been preserved at the highest level. And we did a lot of research and visited a lot of buildings. So we finally came up with a design based not on one building, but many buildings. So this is unique. It's drawn inspiration from many different buildings in Spain and in Morocco, from buildings and madrasas in the city of Fez. And so it's its own thing, and its scale is very unusual because it's so small. All of the designs had to be reduced quite a bit and redrawn to scale. And what really started this are the columns, because the columns are original and they are historic. They are 15th century Spanish columns. So the whole room kind of revolves around the historical columns. And so these craftsmen came here and lived here for about 8 months, and transformed this room from bricks and beams and to this beautiful interior and each of them specialized in a craft. Some were tile workers, the Zalige tiles, some were plaster carvers, some did the woodwork, and here they are at work, and they were amazing to watch them work and transform this space, and the detail with which they've carved the surfaces of this room are incredible. So a whole team of people worked on this, including architects, scholars, curators, and all kinds of other people. So it was a collaborative effort. And this brings my talk to an end, and I encourage you now to go back and look at the objects. I couldn't talk too much about the objects because of the limited time, but maybe to look at the galleries with a fresh eye, and with reference to the themes and interconnections that I talked about. Thank you.